Welcome, everybody, to our third webinar of the year. It's great to see some familiar names logging on. And for anyone who's new here, my name is Ciara Griffin, and I'm working in the AI team here at Trinzo. So I'm the host for all of these webinar sessions. So today we're looking at what a regulated workflow level AI solution actually looks like. And we have a demo lined up for the latter part of the webinar. So really looking forward to showing that to you. So as I said, this is the third session in this year's webinar series. On the first webinar back in March, we discussed a couple of terms like shadow AI, bring your own AI to work, and really introduce those terms as kind of new risks appearing across the industry. We also showcased how the use of your prompt can shift a task from a low risk task to a high risk task. So really interesting examples in that webinar. And if anyone wants to go back to any of those sessions, I'll be sure to send out the link. We have all of our webinars on YouTube now, so we appreciate the likes and subscriptions if you can. So on webinar 2 last month, we broke down the workflow, really how you map out the workflow and to identify AI opportunities. So today we're moving on from those sessions and we're looking at what a workflow level AI actually looks like. We're going to be kind of introducing how you set that up and then showcasing a demo which is based on a complaints handling process. So really looking forward to today. As I mentioned, I've already introduced myself, but again, we have our experts on again today, as we do every session. So we've Connor Flynn, Head of Innovation here at Trinzo, who's our AI expert. And then we also have Colm O'Rourke, our Quality and Regulatory Consultant, who's our Quality and Regulatory Expert. So I briefly kind of touched on the agenda and what we're going to discuss in today's session, but just so you all know, we'll be wrapping up in 45 minutes. The sun is splitting the rocks here in Ireland, so I think everyone will want to get out and get some sun if they can. And yeah, if anyone has any questions throughout the session, we just really encourage you to add them into the Q&A box up at the top of your screen there. And if you have any comments or anything else, you can add it into the chat. So with that, we'll kick into it. And Connor, I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, so this is a bit of a refresh. I think a lot of you might have seen this before, particularly if you've attended any of our events. But I suppose what we're just trying to get across here is when people say AI, they could mean a whole load of different things. And like I always use the example that if you get 10 AI experts in a room, you won't get them to agree on half of the things that they call AI or not AI. But from a distance, if you were to step back and look at stuff, traditional AI is really machine learning, and that's about sensing patterns in large data sets and making predictions on that as long as nothing changes. And this is what some of the older computer scientists would know about and talk about. And this is still relevant today, but it's only really useful on a practical level in certain use cases. But of course, that machine learning is in behind the generative AI that is what most people are talking about today when they mean AI. And what generative AI does is on top of that machine learning and series of algorithms, it puts a natural language processing engine on top and can create content or material from that sensing and predicting, and could do it across a lot of different tasks. And we see it today in Copilot, in ChatGPT, in Anthropic, in Gemini. We see it all over the place. Now, agentic AI is what people are talking about all the time. So if you think about it, traditional AI allows you to spot the patterns and predict when a machine's going to break down or forecast certain financial events or whatever. We know it's iffy on how accurate it is, and it depends very much on the quality of data going in and how controlled the environment it is operating in. Generative AI is about taking that and making something up And we know that goes all over the place, if you know what I mean. People call it hallucinations, but really it's a prediction model on top of that, which can predict, which you can interact with using natural language, and you can predict, it can predict um, blocks of text and stuff like that. And it's really handy for a lot of things that we do. Agentic AI is the next step where using that prediction, it actually goes and does something for you. So you can have it as a standalone agent insofar as take this input, analyze it, and send the output to Kira and Colin. You know what I mean? So it's doing something on the back of just the generation of the output. And then we'll show you a bit of a multi-agent system today with a lot of health warnings around it. But what you'll find is it's very rare that there is one single solution for any particular problem. So you'll need to layer in a lot of deterministic tools, because we know generative AI is non-deterministic. We can't predict the accuracy of its output because it's a prediction, it's a guessing machine. But when we need absolute accuracy, generative AI is probably not the way to go. So we would use deterministic tools, Python scripts and SQL database lookups and lots of stuff that we'll show you today in an agentic flow in order to do certain tasks that we need to be right. Now, this is the time, Colin and Kira, to say whether I've confused the hell out of everyone or it makes sense.
No, I'm happy to listen to it because I feel the more I hear it, it'll actually start to sink in. So hopefully that was of benefit to everyone else. Yeah, no, very good. Nothing to add to that, obviously. Yeah, but here this slide, I'll come in here for sure. So like a lot of talk there of the different AI tools and systems and how they operate. But an absolutely core principle, and we've talked about this lots and lots in different webinars, and we talk about it again today, and we'll continue to talk about it, is human accountability, right? Human in the loop. The human always has to make the decision. So AI is, and we're very consistent in our messaging here, I suppose, in anything we do in Trinzo, is it's a tool. It's a support tool, right? It's not here to take over an entire workflow or to replace a person in our environment. So we're speaking from the point of view of a regulated environment. So the people listening to us today are in largely medtech, but they're life science, they could be in pharma. We work in a regulated environment. And at this point, and we've discussed internally, how far into the future will it be before it's acceptable for AI to make a decision? That could be so far off we don't even think about it. So a human always must remain accountable. And there's a saying many of you will be familiar with from, a quality system is you can outsource the task, but never the responsibility. So, you might not sterilize your product, you outsource it to contract sterilizer, but you're still responsible for the sterility of your product. If something goes wrong, you can't blame the contract sterilizer. And it's the same thing here with AI. So we can use it, we'll happily use it, we'll happily integrate it into workflows to improve our efficiency, but we must make the decision. And that's, I suppose, a really core principle that we take with us when we operate in this space. And these are examples of the questions that we would, that are kind of always on our mind when we are developing or deploying AI solutions is, how were conclusions reached? So I might reach a conclusion based on the output of AI. So I just need to know that. I need to know, and then I need to know what level of confidence can I have in that output, because if it's impacting my decision, but I'm still ultimately the one making the decision. And these other questions here as well, like where did the approval occur? So if it's a multi-step process, there may be various approval steps, and how were each one of those approval steps influenced or impacted by AI. We need to understand that as well. And we'll talk more in the demo about that kind of process mapping and understanding in our demo example where AI is fitting in and how we document that as well. So this is kind of part of that. But ultimately, we're not going anywhere as humans. Yeah. We still need to make the decision and, face the consequences, I suppose, as well if something goes wrong.
And a really clear example of that, Colin, is I think everybody here will be aware of the warning letter a cosmetics company got recently. And I was in a room talking with a lot of peers of yours in the last couple of weeks, and I was a little bit more, how could I say, forgiving to them. So you can imagine what happened. New MOCRA legislation came in. They all of a sudden had to write all these SOPs and everything like that. They probably got a techie company in to go and generate all this documentation. And then when they were audited, somebody said, well, I don't know where that came up with. The computer made it. And I was saying, like, people from a life science background in a quality setting would never make that mistake. And there was a bit more nervous laughter in the room than I expected.
I know, we're
But
much better at covering our tracks. We're used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Don't
you
admit
can
it,
see a computer can't go to jail. You can't fine a computer for so the human must always be accountable. And I think we understand that intrinsically in the life sciences. I hope we understand that intrinsically. Yeah. Okay, so here's just a few examples. This might seem a little bit high level for you. Hopefully you'll see a lot of this as we're going through the demo. But again, health warnings all over this demo, and it'll be a bit all over the place, but you get some idea of what can be done. So we know that a task like drafting summaries, I bet you there's nobody on this call who isn't using a generative AI tool to help them drafting summaries. And it's very, very good for that. For complaint triage support, we're saying agentic AI in here, and we'll show you why we say that. And we can talk about that later. ERP lot verification. So you need to be exact here. So generative AI is not a suitable tool for this. Might be a suitable tool of finding out what you're looking for, understanding the context in what you're in, but actually the lookup, you want it to be very exact, precise, and right every time. And you want to be able to audit that very clearly. So an SQL database or a deterministic query through a script or something. For KPI calculations, not just for any calculations, generative models are very poor at doing maths. So you want to call on a tool or write a Python script or something in order to do the maths. If you have a calculation to do in whatever tasks you're doing, don't do your maths homework on ChatGPT is basically what I'm saying. Or your tax return. Don't be very careful analyzing numerical data with a tool, with a generative AI tool alone. Be very, very careful on that. SOP retrieval, so you're using a RAG or a vector search and generative AI on top of that in order to pull the information from a source, and then maybe you want to do stuff with generative AI from there. So that's a hybrid approach there. Communication drafting, generative AI, like I feel guilty when I just respond to an email straight off and then I double guess myself, was that professional enough? It cleans up a lot of the messy, the unstructured, or the inappropriate level of formality in some of the emails I send. So I hope you're all using that. For regulatory approval and final sign off, if you're using an AI to do that, you're going to jail. It has to be a human. Any thoughts or questions on that?
I mean,
no comment on your direct communication, Connor.
Yeah, or the going to jail part. No, I did when we were prepping and I saw this, I thought it was a really cool slide because, again, not coming from, that natural technology background, it's all kind of one big blur to me, but this actually lays it out very nicely. And I think there's a lot of comfort as well in particularly like the ERP lot verification. So we'll see in the demo, part of what we're seeing is, we want to retrieve specific lot numbers from a database. And it's just like you said, that accuracy that's required, that I guess it's the message for me that I take away from this is that there's flexibility in the different kinds of tools we can deploy depending on the task. Like it's not a one shot, fixes all here. And then also knowing where not to deploy a particular tool is just as important. So this clarified a lot of that for me.
Yeah. And I suppose like like any solution that a company may be looking for will include multiple tools. So it might include agentic, Gen AI, and also RAG. So it's knowing when to pull each and when it's appropriate for the particular task.
Now, the next slide kind of shows you the future, and it's quite broad insofar as so any set of tasks or any jobs you'll want to do will have different layers of AI through it. It will have different types of deterministic controls depending on what you're wanting from it, but it will always have human oversight. But the ability to understand which tools to choose, be it the AI, be it the deterministic controls, or where the human is coming in, is the real trick of making any of this work. And I suppose there's a plus and a minus of right now, because these tools are so useful, so flexible, adaptable, and so small, if you know what I mean, that we can use a lot of them ourselves off the shelf and start putting them together and whatnot. We can pick and choose and build systems over time. While if you think about years ago, you kind of had to build out the whole system, test it out, then spend ages configuring it and everything like that. Now you can build out this part of the process, that part of the process, and you can add it up over time and connect up to other systems as and when you're ready, as your maturity and your learning is happening. So this is going to call for a different type of work environment, a work environment that, like we've been talking for 20 years, people need to be problem solvers and they need to learn and adapt on their job. Well, by gosh, you really need to start buying into that now, because it will be expected of a lot of the people here that they will be managing, building the ones they need, choosing the ones they need, understanding where the human oversight is needed, and layering this into their process over the rest of their career, or over the rest of the career of that workflow or that process. And understanding that is going to be a critical part of a lot of our work going forward.
I think just to add as well, Connor, there is that it's not one size fits all for every process either. And I think this is where, the value of knowing how to develop and deploy a solution like this. So we're going to look at an example in complaint handling. We're going to look at the very front end of a complaint handling sample and our process. And based on that, we've determined the various AI layers, deterministic control and human oversight. But if we were to do a project in, clinical evaluation, where you would put a deterministic control and human oversight would look different. If we're doing something in a manufacturing process or risk or whatever it might be. And it's just knowing that, if these are our three very broad buckets at this point, is that they need to be kind of slotted in depending on the process in front of you. So it's very bespoke almost to the process that you are trying to optimize or support with the AI tool.
And I think what you're hitting on there, Colin, is the beauty and the problem with generative AI, because workflows will now be personalized, if you know what I mean, to the company. And you're given different workflows there, but no two complaints handling processes are the same. Like even within the same company, you might have several different. But anyway, but that's it. But then the problem with that is, oh my God, how much work am I going to have to do?
Well, we'll simplify that, though, won't we? That's what we're here for.
Press the red button.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what we're going to go through today. I suppose so just to give you, remember, I'm talking about health warnings all the time. So we whipped this up pretty quickly in a couple of hours. What we had to whip up was two different databases. Well, one's an Excel sheet, one for knowledge and one for retrieving stuff. We had to whip up a front end and put so much stuff on it that it wouldn't make sense, if you know what I mean. You'll see when I show it to you. We had to whip up, obviously, different agents along the workflow and different tools to do stuff. And we had to do this really, really quickly, and to make sure that that nobody looking at this could ever tie it back to any client that we've ever worked with. So I suppose what I'm trying to say by that is, like what I just told you there is a 6-month project 2 years ago. I'm saying that is now a 1-week project. 2 years ago, that might have been a €1 million project. Now it's a €10,000 project, if you know what I mean. So the order of magnitude, and remember we're talking about the or the fruit that you can pick is much more. There's a much greater volume and variety of the stuff that you can apply AI to. That's what I want you to keep in mind, rather than the robustness of the demo itself. I'm trying to make every excuse for when it goes badly here.
You're a great salesman, Connor. Like, come on, I think people understand the concept of a demo, you know?
Okay, all right. Go on to the diagram of the thing. So what's this? As Colm said, this is just the triage of the complaint. So the idea of this is a complaint comes in, and how do I, as a non-expert, get the information to the right people so that they can analyze the complaint? Now, we have seen with many of our customers that you're thinking, oh, that's a pretty quick thing. It is not. It takes a long time and can be fraught with stress and confusion and a lot of things. So the idea of this is it would clean up just one single part of the process and put it in motion the speeding up of the whole process. Now, what this would do, if you actually implemented it, or whatever thing of this is, it would just move the bottleneck to somewhere else. But that's where you'd go to next for your next set, and you'd build it up iteratively over time, rather than trying to imagine everything 2 years in advance. You can start building it over time. Okay, will I take the screen now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Now, while you're doing that, again, to reiterate, where this is a snapshot of the first part of complaints handling is a very, very large process. We are taking a complaint up to the point of it being analyzed. So we're not doing the analysis, but it is just that front part. And as Connor said, you like the beauty of something like this is you can just select a discrete portion of a much larger process, and why you might choose that or not, there's various reasons, and you can deploy an AI solution there, and it's an opportunity for your team to become familiar with interacting with a solution like this. And then when people are comfortable with that, you can decide, okay, let's bite off the next chunk now, and how does this fit into that? So it's like a modular approach, because if you were going to say, like, okay, let's use AI to optimize our entire complaints handling process, like that's enormous, and you don't need to do it like that. It's much more efficient to go piece by piece, and largely because of, and this is something we touched on in previous webinars, is people's hesitancy to begin working and interacting with AI. So this is a wonderful way to get people familiar and to sort of lower that fear by saying, we're just going to take a bite-sized chunk of this process, and we're going to be able to show a return on investment, because something that was going to take 4 hours we can now do in 25 minutes or whatever it is. And then that's further buy-in at an organizational level to continue to roll out these solutions. So I think that's very much part of Trinzo's ethos when it comes to deploying AI solutions, is just keep it small and build on what you have.
Thanks, Colin. You can see a dashboard here, and there's a lot of information on it. Obviously, we can whip up different information wherever we want. Now, what I'm going to take you through is I'm going to show you how the AI is going to guide me by pulling out data and looking for the human to approve before moving on along the way. We did originally have a comparison agent in here, but you can imagine we had to make dummy data, and the data starts getting very messy very quickly when you're making synthetic data very quickly. So we kind of pulled that out of it. But you'll see here, we've got a dashboard with lots of different complaints and lots of information about the complaints on the left-hand side here. And on the right-hand side, we have a chat style interface that's going to bring us through the complaints process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste a complaint in here, but you can imagine very easily you could send it on from an email. if you know what I mean. Okay, let me find. Okay. Okay. What do we do with the broken one? I like this one. Well, I don't particularly like it. Okay. So these complaints are all based on, if you are a regular listener to our series, the CardioNova company that Colin
Oh,
invented.
that's right.
I
Yeah.
think in the future we should build up a company, make that stent, and like take over the
Should.
world. Isn't that it?
Oh, easy
We'll
as
have
that. Yeah.
we'll have our whole QMS already pre-built in advance. So this is an email about a damaged stent from a nurse at St. Jude's Hospital. Hi, we had a bit of an issue with one of your stents today. It looked like the plastic was peeling off the metal while we were prepping it. We used a different one instead. I think the lot number was BX 2026-010. What do we do with the broken one? So I press analyze complaint and it will start sucking information out and telling me whether it's happy or not. So severity ranking is high there. I don't know if that's high. What would you think, Colin?
It's very hard to tell at this stage
Hard to tell.
based on the information. So you'd probably leave it high just in case.
So you see it's
And
pulled
that,
yeah.
to interrupt, kind of that severity ranking, like we would have trained this particular agent in that determination. So a human is still, it's prompting by saying, I think this is high, you choose, but how it gets to making that prompt of this is high or medium, that would be part of the deployment, would be training it based on historic data or whatever it might be. It's not just, or pointing it towards reference documents, for example.
Mhm. So you can see here, it's pulled out the lot. It can't figure out the company or the country. It's a malfunction. Is that correct? Like, yeah. And you need to talk to someone about this, and it immediately starts the counter. So one of the things was, how do I keep track of when I need to report this or when I need to close this? Now it's getting some of this information from a repository with the SOPs, the SLAs, and all that we've mocked up, and it's getting other of this well, it's just getting that from the email at the moment, but it would have got that at a later stage from another database where we have mock lot numbers in later. So I review it here. Now it'll generate a complaint ID when I save it, but you can see we're on 82 complaints there. Complaint type, it's already seen that it's me. It's put the status as triage pending, the aware update. I can do whatever I need to on that if I need to, and I'm just going, yeah, that's good. Now it's pulled out the product ID from that database that I was talking about. We still have the lot ID. Now I can say where the source of the complaint was. Where will we say it was? Who will we blame? Ireland, Italy, Spain, or France?
No comment.
Or Ireland, just in case.
Galway. Let's just go. Oh, source status. I just say customer. Is it linked to a kappa? Now we've put some kappas here where we can open up and have a look at other things linked to that to see is it likely to be part of that kappa or not. But I'll just link it to kappa
And
one.
and just again to clarify here, this is the very early stage. We're not opening a kappa on this. We're not necessarily saying this complaint needs to be added to kappa 1, but it is a database in the background that is saying when we get to the actual analysis, please consider kappa 1 because it sounds like it's familiar. So it's just again prompting, and you could build lots of these different triggers in here as well.
And then I can review it there and I put in a serious. What would you say that is?
I'll give it serious for now.
Serious. Now there's no patient. It's picked up that there was no patient involved, but I can override it here if I have more context or somebody tells me something else. And stakeholder communication required, yes. Now usually I don't know. Hang on. I don't have any extra information about it, but you might be able to put some extra context in there. I think Colin needs to look at this or something, you know. Let's do that. I don't know if that is something that you would often do. So then I can check it all, plastic peeling off metal plate during preparation, potential malfunction where plastic is peeling off metal, a malfunction with potential impact, lock, blah, requires investigation, check and save. So now I can save the complaint, and you see that goes to 83. So it's updated my dashboard across the way, and it's updated whatever systems it needs to update. Now, the next step is I need to communicate with whoever I need to communicate with. And it's suggesting I need to communicate with all these people, but I'm only going to choose one. Just choose one. Which one column? Would it be up?
You could remove management, yeah, and leave the other three. I mean, this again would be based on the SOPs of the organization. They would determine who needs to know at this stage. Because again, the analysis hasn't happened yet. So we are saying it is a complaint. It's potentially reportable based on the information we have. And we're just moving it to the next stage where a deeper analysis will be done.
So I'm just going to generate it for medical safety and generate communication, generate comms. And what it'll do is it'll generate up a draft email. It gives me 2 options, but that's up to you. And then you can review the email, and then you can send the email, and then it's done. Now we can look at view complaints. This was the latest complaint here, and we can look at it here. Hi, potentially reportable triage linked to a kappa. You need to check that, as Colin was saying. You've got the status of it here. So all of a sudden you have all this clean data ready to plug into whatever system you need to plug into when and where you want to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Nobody died.
I think.
Yeah.
Not yet. Yeah, and I think it's a good point again, just to reiterate that this is like what we've shown here can be completely customized to a particular company's, how they handle complaint intake and what different pieces of information are relevant. And then, you do want to have one eye onto, well, who's the receiver of this? I mean, it's like any process, input, output, right? So the output of this process is going to be the input of another one. And what's happening in that other process and what information is critical for them, let's build that into this interface. But I think the value in something like this is really it's the usability of it. You're staying on one screen and you're doing several things. You're not jumping around multiple tabs, and that in itself is time saving. And I think another important point to bring up as well.
Let me double down on that, Colin, insofar as, like, you may not be thinking, but we've changed the relationship between the computer and the person in the intake, from what I see on the ground anyway, from the computer sitting there and waiting for the person to run around and do everything, to the person sitting there and the computer running around and doing everything. And that's an enormous time saver and stress saver. It's also, you're using the brain of the human and the muscle of the machine, while what we see in practice is you're using the brain of a dumb system and the muscle of the human to do a job that's unfit for a human, if you know what I mean. So that agentic system has allowed us to flip the script on the job, if you know what I mean. Now, there are lots of other things. We could automate all of this, which I wouldn't do, but you would start to get more and more confident on what you could automate or where you'd want the person to step in or what information, but start very, very carefully.
Yeah, and I think, like, to the point of that kind of comfort level and starting carefully and starting slow and building on, like, just to acknowledge, because I'm sure a lot of people, listening to us right now will think about, they might have a bit of fear in the back of their mind of, well, all right, this all looks great, it'll save us a lot of time, but what happens when my auditor from a notified body or the FDA comes in and they ask me, oh, this is a fine piece of software here, show me the validation that's sitting behind this, right? And I think a lot of people are inherently, they'll get a bit of, anxiety when you think about AI system, how are we going to validate this? But I think it's really important to acknowledge, like, we know that. I mean, we're not trying to run around deploying AI systems everywhere and walking out the door and considering that no auditor is ever going to question this. It's very much in front of mind for us. And there's Connor has a statistic when we're doing a project like this, it's 40-40-20 in terms of time, and one of those 40 blocks is the testing. So we absolutely test. Now, I'm going to be careful and not say validate, but we do a lot of testing when we would deploy a system like this. And we mentioned process maps earlier. So, before we touched anything, and Jack, one of our colleagues, did a great job in the last webinar talking about process mapping and how we would look at that. We would have this process mapped out very clearly, and we would identify what part of the process is AI involved in, and what is that piece of AI that is operating there, and we would give it an intended purpose, right? And the intended purpose doesn't have to be complicated. Is the intended purpose of this piece is to query the SAP database or the ERP to find the lot number. That's the intended purpose. We would also risk assess that piece, low, medium, and high, depending on the severity of or the criticality of the information that's coming out of that particular AI component. And then based on the intended purpose and the risk level, we would generate a test plan or protocol for that particular AI tool or agent, whatever we want to call it. And we do that for every piece of AI that is deployed. So at the end of all of this, you do actually have a body of documentation that you can show, and an auditor will want to see that. Of course they will, where basically you're saying, here is our process, here is where we're using AI, this is what kind of AI tool it is, whether it's agentic or it's deterministic, this is the intended purpose of that piece of AI. Here is the risk level, and here's the testing we've done commensurate with the risk level and the intended purpose. So it's just I guess to make everyone aware that's absolutely part of a development and deployment project would be that level of documentation, because you have to be. I mean, auditors are getting more and more familiar with seeing things like this, but there's always going to be that reliability, repeatability, sort of validation style question, and we will help customers in preparing for that. Did I miss anything, Connor?
No, but that's very good. And the 40-40-20 the column talks about is 40% build, 40% test, 20% deploy. So deploy would include training, making sure that it's hooked up and everything like that. But that's all assuming that you've gone through Jack's process and you have spec'd out exactly what you want.
So if you like taking what we showed here today, if we were going to deploy that real life, develop and deploy in a client, including Jack's process, I shouldn't say Jack's, Trinzo's process, but that mapping, are we talking a week, 2 weeks, a month to have something in place working?
So if we got the right use case, you'd have a day designing it, if you know what I mean, and mocking up lots of dashboards and whatnot and looking through it and agreeing with it. And you'd have the specs of what you want to do and your intended purpose and all of the requirements gathered. You'd be a day to a day and a half building it and making sure that it's working. You'd have the same amount of time testing it, and then you'd have less time than that. So within a week, you could turn around something like this and have it operational and be very confident. And as you say, you'd have the tool, you'd have the documentation, you'd have the training, and the person who's using it will have built it with you. So they'll be very confident and know its limitations and how to use it.
And something like this, you could run in parallel with your existing system for a month or 3 months or something like that, as a further level of testing.
So there's two things you're saying. There's one, the further ongoing testing, and that depends on the culture, the risk of the tool and everything like that. But there's a second thing insofar as there are very few companies that at organizational level aren't looking at big AI systems. The future proof of this is that you've documented out your workflow. You've documented out what you're trying to do. You've documented out your coding. You've documented out your instructions. So your company moves from Microsoft Copilot to Google Gemini. Well, you can just spin it up in Google Gemini, do a little bit of testing. You're not starting again. You're porting it over. And then in the future, what's going to hit people is people will want to use different models for different tasks depending on the costs. So it's likely a lot of your businesses are going to have orchestrators like we use ARIA, and that's what we use to build this. And they're going to say, we want to use the cheap model on Copilot for the summarizing. We want to use the expensive Claude model for the trend analysis because we know it's better at that. But then we want to go back to the cheap Copilot model for drafting the summaries, because if we used Claude for it all, it would cost us $10 to do this, while if we do it that way, it only costs us $1 to do it, and you get the same performance. So that picking and choosing a model is going to be necessary. Because you have the documentation, because you have everything set up, because you understand, it is so simple to just, it's almost a copy and paste job in order to put it in an orchestration system and choose which model to use off the background. Am I making sense there, or do you know what I mean? Like that flexibility is critical, because all we know about the next 3 to 5 years is everything's going to change every second day. And we know cost is going to be something that people are going to be very aware of. So having the ability to know at a granular level what everything does, and having the ability to be able to adapt that on the fly very quickly on the fly is a bit throwaway, but you know what I mean. Very quickly.
Yeah. But it's not. Nothing here is going to be redundant in 6 months' time.
Nothing here is going to be redundant from a framework and from a documentation level for quite a while.
Yep.
I actually have experience with that. I got locked out of ChatGPT, but thankfully I had saved all my GPTs down to a folder. So I could just, when I set up my new account, I could add them, and I didn't lose them. So it is really important to document what you've done, and I suppose the next iteration as well. I was able to update from my kind of usage of the GPTs, maybe like adding to the instructions or taking away from them to improve it. But just as well, Colm, very interesting when you kind of brought up around auditing and what you need to have in place for auditors. Our next session in June will have a guest speaker from Scarlet, the notified body. So I'll be sending out the link to that one after this session, but just for you all to be aware, that session will be really interesting, and you'll be getting to asking your questions to the notified body around their expectations of use of AI within quality, regulatory, and R&D. So make sure you
that should
register.
be really good, because we'll get to actually hear, and Scarlett are AI experts, and get to hear from them the expectations around, like what I was just talking about there. If they're auditing a company and they see an AI tool like this in place, what might they expect from a documentation perspective? Which I haven't heard many notified bodies come and talk about that, actually. So I'm really looking forward to that next month.
Great. And yeah, look, if you need support on getting started around kind of the process that Colm and Conor were mentioning, around identifying the areas of opportunity in your workflow, reach out and we can have a session to discuss your needs. But with that, here's the contact details, and thank you very much for joining, and hopefully we'll see you at the next one.
Enjoy the weather, anyone in Ireland.
Thank you.
It might be gone tomorrow, so get out there.
Get out while you can.
Thanks,
Take care,
guys.
everyone.
Bye-bye.